All right.
I heard Vitalik's voice.
I heard his voice. I don't see him. The wizard.
Hello, hello. Testing. One,
The
two,
Wizard of
three.
Vitalik!
Oz. Where is the wizard? We'll give him a minute.
Vitalik is on the interweb.
Vitalik is more of an idea, really, when you think about it.
Hey, dude.
Vitalik, there he is. So
Hello.
we see him now.
Yay!
Welcome. Can we please welcome Vitalik? Thank you.
And welcome, Zuko.
Thanks.
And welcome to Zuko. You know, it's got to be a special day for you guys to be on this stage with me, of course. Now, obviously, Vitalik, major congratulations for the huge milestone last week. One of the most important and challenging, many year in the making technical upgrades, arguably in software history. And I can't think of a better person to kind of tee up the conversation than someone who's known you since you were a lad, I guess, conceiving this network and kind of conceiving this virtual machine, the EVM, and everything that is Ethereum today. So I wanted to give Zuko a chance to kind of tee this conversation up, maybe roast you a little bit, but we'll start with a trip down memory lane, and then we'll get into some of the substance for what comes next for Ethereum, what comes next for privacy, and kind of how these two things are related. So
Awesome.
Zuko, take it away.
Thanks, Ryan. So, Vitalik, you and I met before Zcash and before Ethereum. It was at the 2013 San Jose Bitcoin conference when you and I were both enthusiastic Bitcoiners. And I remember being happy to meet you in person. And I was like, Vitalik, nice to meet you. Isn't Bitcoin awesome? And you said, Bitcoin is the first technology that I've ever loved, which loves me back. And since then, you may have gotten the impression that Bitcoin no longer loves you. But I'm here to tell you, Satoshi still loves you, Vitalik.
Well, thank you, Zuko. And I of course, will always love Satoshi.
Satoshi loves all of his children. Don't let this sour-hearted fundamentalist who came after him deceive you. So, we're enthusiastic Bitcoiners, and I and some of my colleagues were trying to convince Gavin Andresen to add general-purpose programmability into Bitcoin, and that wasn't going very far. And then you emailed me your plan for Ethereum. And I was like, holy shit, this is so exciting. And it'll never work. And then you and the Ethereum devs proved me wrong. Ethereum totally worked. And almost from the very beginning of those days, I remember you guys talking about switching to proof of stake. And I was like, that's a great idea, but it'll never work. And then you tweeted at me in about 2018. I brought my Twitter slides to prove this. May 2018, that's my birthday, 2018. Vitalik says, make Zcash proof of stake. And I reply, So first of all, I've got to say, like Ryan said, that the merge was a historic moment. The Ethereum community proved me wrong yet again, and that is just, as a software engineer and as like an historian of software engineering, I have to say everybody who had a hand in that, you guys, you should be proud of yourselves for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Way to go, Ethereum community.
Vitalik, you can't see the crowd, but they're waving their hands. There's lighters in the crowd, so you're gonna have to use your imagination.
Holding up their phones.
People are excited. This is a packed room, as you can imagine.
Let me interrupt. My first question for you is, what went wrong? I've been waiting for 4 years.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess as goes the apocryphal quote from some Chinese leader about the French Revolution, it's still too early to tell. You know, you know, it looks the transition seems to have gone fine. The transition actually went a lot more smoothly than pretty much everyone expected. It was like every single one of the testnet merges had at least some kind of a bug or some snag that caused at least a few percent of the nodes to drop offline for a while, and the last one even didn't finalize for an hour. But the mainnet merge just went through completely smoothly. Everyone was happy. The chain just immediately adjusted to its new normal. The block times are now running at a nice stable 1 per 12 seconds. I'm not sure if we've even had a single reorg since the merge. So, all gone well so far. But obviously, there's other metrics that it'll take years and maybe more than a decade before we know exactly how all of the details play out. How decentralized will the staking distribution be? How practical will it be for regular people to run nodes once all of the technological upgrades that we've still promised and that are still promises that we haven't delivered come to fruition? And all of those little details, but. No, in general, I think the Ethereum community is celebrating, and it really does feel like a sky that has been cloudy for almost a decade is finally cleared.
Vitalik, so congratulations on that. To that point, I think we have been thinking about the merge for so long, and it's been such a big part of the upgrade cycle that there is a long-term plan which is incredibly detailed that you've put together in a flowchart that I can't quite wrap my head around. Maybe Zuko and some smart people in the room can.
I had the same question.
But I'd love to hear from you, Vitalik. What now that things have gone smoothly with the merge, or at least the kind of first phase of the merge, and it was a successful transition to proof of stake, where are you immediately turning your attention, and how much of it is keeping an eye out for potential issues that might arise, unintended consequences, or things you weren't necessarily expecting, versus the next phase of the Ethereum roadmap? And kind of what does that transition look like? What's the core developer team and the community starting to turn their attention to now that this big milestone has been achieved?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ethereum core research and dev community's Eye of Sauron is now tilted pretty squarely toward solving the scalability challenge, right? Like when we've talked in the past and just tried to summarize, what is the Ethereum roadmap about in 2 things, the answer has always been proof of stake and sharding. And proof of stake is finally here, but sharding is the next step, and that isn't quite here yet, right? So this is the track on the roadmap that we call the surge, right? So the surge in the capacity of transactions that the chain will be able to process. And it's a combination of layer 1 stuff that allows the Ethereum chain to process more data, together with all of these layer 2 technologies and rollups and optimistic rollups and ZK rollups and that whole batch of fancy stuff. And its ability to actually create these sort of Ethereum inside of Ethereum like layers that actually will be able to process many thousands or tens of thousands of transactions a second eventually. And it'll still take a while to get there. And I think unlike the merge, the surge will be much less of a single event. It'll be something that happens in lots of stages where each of those stages provides some concrete value, right? Like Optimism, Arbitrum, Scroll, Starknet, that whole family, they're already here, and there's some applications on them already, and you can save fees already, and you can use them already. But then next step is this thing that we call proto-dank sharding, which will make data cheaper and which will make transactions on all of those things cheaper. And proto-dank sharding, as implied by the name, is actually the proto version of a full dank sharding, which will come even later. And then the rollups themselves are going to start improving in efficiency because of compression. And like you see, there's this grab bag of different technologies. Some of them being cryptography, some of them being peer-to-peer networking, some of them just being economics and just the innovations that you can unlock by doing multi-dimensional gas pricing. And it's not one big thing. It's like a grab bag of things, each of which provides, somewhere close to a 10x gain. And the good news is that those multiply on top of each other. So we're just going to start seeing, transactions get cheaper, and then transactions get even cheaper, and then transactions that keep getting even cheaper. And this is the thing that our research and dev community is already completely focused on.
I have a dumb question. If if the L2s are going to be doing that anyway, then why does the Ethereum L1 need proto-dank sharding?
So the L1 and the L2 improvements stack on top of each other, right? So L2s can process a certain number of transactions for every kilobyte of data that the Ethereum chain processes. It's about somewhere between 16 to 60 bytes a transaction with optimal compression, depending on what kind of transaction it is. And so upgrades to L1 that improve that amount, the amount of data L1 can store, increase the scalability of L2. But then upgrades to L2 that add compression and add security and other things that make it possible to actually use that data effectively. Like that's what's happening at the same time. So right. So ultimately, we need both.
Okay. And no more holding our breath. The surge is going to come in many small surges.
Indeed.
No more staying up all night watching the little graph.
I mean, I'm sure actually, I was about to say I'm sure individual hard forks will come at random times that'll be in the middle of the night, but then I realized that one of the benefits of proof of stake is that we can time transition points exactly because a slot corresponds to a particular timestamp. And so, it may well be the case that all future upgrades will happen at 1400 UTC or whatever. And, everyone will be able to stay awake and watch them happen.
With the merge being completed and fully shipped, I think some of the conversation has shifted to how are we handling private transactions and how are we going from what Zooko's coined the HTTP to HTTPS version of the Internet of Value, right? So,
we've seen a lot of developments that really put a fine point on that in the last couple of months.
And so one question that I have for you, and I know Zooko has some feelings on this and likely some follow-ups, is how important is privacy at the base layer versus privacy at the roll-up layer and transaction layer for Ethereum? Because Tornado Cash, I think, hints at, or the sanctions of Tornado Cash hints at some of the potential dangers to implementing privacy at a core level, or not implementing enough privacy at a core level. And I'm curious how you two, based on your conversations with regulators and based on your kind of technical conversations, where you think the right balance is going forward.
That's a good question, but let me add in that censorship resistance at the base layer really requires privacy, but also MEV resistance. Like censorship and MEV are almost the same thing at the technical level at the base layer. That's a question. What do you think?
Interesting. I would say kind of yes and kind of no. The reason is that MEV is more a property of these more complicated higher level applications, like basically applications that create opportunities for multiple people to come in and grab value where there's a race to be the first one. And simple payments is not one of those applications, right? So this is the reason why Bitcoin doesn't really have MEV optimization issues to the extent that Ethereum does. But indeed, censorship is something that affects both complicated applications and simple money transfer, right? And I think so far the only privacy preserving stuff that we've seen on top of Ethereum that's actually running is privacy of simple asset transfers. I mean, eventually, obviously, the technology is going to improve, and we have Aztec and we have more and more fancy things, but privacy is really coming to the core in terms of its importance even before then.
Do you think that this is important to prioritize sooner in the roadmap than later at the base layer, just given what we've seen more recently, Vitalik? Because I think for a while the conversation was this merge is, well, I'm saying among the critics anyway, that one of the critiques for the merge was this is an impossible upgrade, it's never going to happen, it keeps getting pushed out, you know, blah, 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 right? There's all these risks to it. And then it happened, and you could hear a pin drop for like 1 second, and then all the critics turned around and said, well, now everything's going to be censorable because all transactions are ultimately going through AWS, Google Cloud, and you know now we can just turn off the network and hunt down all the validators. So is that a concern that has been elevated post-Tornado Cash, or is the roadmap unchanged and you're going to push that conversation out to roll-ups and other kind of individual applications to dictate kind of how private they want their systems to be?
Great question.
Yeah, so I think there's two questions in that question, right? One of those questions is how does the Ethereum network approach privacy? And the other question is how does the Ethereum network approach not being censored? And for the first question, I think realistically our answer is still and can only be for at least some amount of time, some kind of application layer, kind of layer 2 style privacy. And the reason for that is less kind of ideological or economic or political or anything like that, and more just technical, which is that we don't know what kinds of technologies are going to be best for giving people the best kind of privacy. And that's true at a level of do you use Splunk or do you use Halo? It's true at the level of, are we privacy preserving just currency versus more complicated applications? If so, then what does the language that people use to program privacy even look like? And just all of these very unresolved issues where it just feels like the only thing the Ethereum network can do at this point is just offer a low-level general purpose platform and let people build stuff on top. As for network layer censorship resistance, I mean, that has absolutely been a discussion in core Ethereum research and dev circles. And I think in general, a couple of opinions, right? I mean, one of them is that I do think that there are people who are much more defeatist about the centralization of proof of stake than is the reality, right? So like people kind of casually say things like, oh, Lido plus Coinbase have 42%, and a lot of people in the Ethereum ecosystem do sometimes like criticizing Lido because especially if it gets even larger, its governance does introduce more centralization vectors and blah blah blah. But at the same time, like Lido is not a single actor, right? Lido is a system that splits stake between somewhere around 20 different staking providers, and even accomplishes a pretty even split between them. And so if you look at like actual actors that are running nodes, Lido isn't one of them. Lido is like something like a dozen of them, right? And so from that point of view, and then if you start looking into the future, one of the reasons why some people stake inside of pools instead of solo staking is because if you stake in pools, you have liquidity, right? And withdrawals have not been enabled, but withdrawals are going to be enabled, and the plan is to enable withdrawals in the next hard fork, right? And so once you can just take your money and bring it back instantly, the calculation changes. So from a just decentralization of a stake point of view, I mean, I think one, a lot of things are sort of better than the trolls have been saying, and things are improving. And two is that there is a defense in depth sort of strategy that's being, I think, very actively worked on, right? So one example of this is people are concerned about this idea of builder centralization, where you have things like MEV Boost, which lets validators outsource the block creation to specialized actors, and those specialized actors are going to be doing a better job of extracting every last cent of revenue out of the blocks. And the risk is that is one builder just going to dominate that ecosystem? And So one of the solutions there is to kind of move from this MEV boost world to a world where proposer builder separation is in protocol, and so at least the relay layer can be completely removed and moved into the protocol. The other is that there are ways to change the protocol so that the proposer can still ensure that some transactions get included into the next block, into their block, regardless of what the builder says, right? So the idea, this is something that we call partial block auctions. Instead of the proposer giving up the entire right to choose the contents of the block to a builder, the proposer is still choosing the sum of the contents, and the builder is basically being just allocated the right to reorder the contents and insert some of their own transactions. So they're getting a power that's much more limited than the power to create a block entirely. And so their ability to censor is reduced quite a bit, right? So I guess to kind of zoom out a bit more, right, in the sort of less technical way to think about it is that, you know, there are very smart people that are working at approaching the problem of Ethereum network decentralization and censorship resistance at multiple layers of a stack from different angles. And, you know, there's lots of very good ideas that are there already, and lots of things are already being worked on. And, you know, if you want to bet against hundreds of very smart people, I have a hypothetical time machine to go back in time to before the merge, so it can to sell you, so you can go argue that the merge will never happen.
That's a good idea, but it'll never work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to see Dark Vitalik T-shirt and all starting to have a little bit more swagger post merge.
All right,
it's
yeah.
well deserved. So, but Zooko, I do want to double click on this. Do you think that the core developers and the Ethereum community that's working on some of these upgrades, is it sufficient? Is it the right balance? What's on your wish list for things you'd like to see as kind of base layer privacy or improvements to the protocol?
I just made the joke, but I got to do it again. That sounds like, I think I understand like 80% of what Vitalik just said. Those guys are super smart. They're smarter than me. But the people on the other side are super smart too. And there's hundreds and more of developers on that side too. And not just developers, regulators, police, armies in all these different countries. So it sounds like a real battle. And like with the merge and like with Ethereum 1.0, I'm going to withhold judgment on whether that's going to work. I have this general like philosophical perspective that network protocols and game theory are a higher layer of the stack than information theory and cryptography. And so, not to show my own point.
Just explain that a little bit.
Well, I'm not sure it makes sense. Maybe Vitalik can poke a hole in it, but I feel like if the information is out there, which people can use for MEV, they can use for building their like industrial scale profitable enterprises, and your attackers can use that information to choose targets, to choose techniques, then I feel like you're fighting on adverse terrain. I think that kind of information leakage gives the asymmetric advantage to the attacker, which is the censor or the MEV exploiter. And then if you could invert that, which Vitalik very accurately said, I totally agree, that Ethereum cannot do that anytime soon. Maybe in 5 or 10 years, maybe with next generation of zero-knowledge proofs. You should use Halo. It's the best zero-knowledge proof. But in the foreseeable future, Ethereum cannot reverse the information theory advantage at the base layer like Zcash started with, right? So the alternative world is where that information is end-to-end encrypted, so the information is only available to the end users and is not available to the block producers in the middle or to the like the front ends and MEV services and things in the middle, and it's also not available to the attackers, to the armies or censors or regulators or whoever wants to influence what the end users can do. So basically, I just like to register my skepticism. You're right, you can't put privacy into the base layer within the next 5 years. I really don't know if you're right that network protocols and trying to re-decentralize the block production ecosystem is going to be successful.
We'll see.
Let's exchange
All right,
another tweet and check back in 5 years.
Yeah, so we're to stalemate on that one. We'll check back in a few years. Are you going to switch to proof of stake?
Oh, yeah. So we've been, yeah. So we've literally been waiting to see what we can learn from Ethereum. I guess what we've learned is that it actually works. It's actually doable. I hope to learn a whole lot more from Ethereum and from also Cosmos and Tezos, which are the three that I feel like have pioneered it really effectively. And I'm asking for Vitalik's advice on how to proceed.
Vitalik, I'm curious. Some folks in the community, I think yourself included, have touted the benefits from an environmental standpoint of the switch to proof of stake. Something like 0.2% of the world's electricity usage is now off the grid thanks to proof of stake versus GPU mining with Ethereum. Do you think that there is a role for proof of work networks going forward, and do these two play off of each other and reinforce each other? Or do you think that all crypto networks at scale will ultimately move to proof of stake, or should move to proof of stake?
I'd say should. Would is obviously a complicated question that's has to do more with like various community, social, and political factors than anything I can control. I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's people that try that like assign these metaphysical properties to proof of work and proof of stake, like if something has a physical connection to reality, then it's like more real in some way, which like I've just never believed, because the connection to reality is on the sell side and not on the buy side. Like I've always just thought of proof of work and proof of stake as being these pragmatic technologies whose goals are to, like, number one, protect the network, and number two, not be captured. And as proof of stake matures, I expect it to just increase in legitimacy more and more over time. I hope that Zcash moves over. I am also very hopeful that Dogecoin is going to move over to proof of stake at some point soon.
Cool.
Especially now that there's a clear roadmap for how something like that can be done. And then for the other chains, we'll see. I mean, some of them might. I'm sure at least some of them never will. I mean, there might even be some compromise middle ground where some chains end up moving to some kind of hybrid proof of stake, and that'll be deemed to be enough security. And like, because fees are low, the level of electricity consumption will just not be big enough for people to worry about anymore. I don't know. Like, there's definitely a lot of possible futures. Yeah. No. We will see. I'm not sure there's much more that we can say at this point right now.
So we have 2 minutes left. I want to do one lightning round. I would argue that the merge was the most important item to de-risk in crypto in the past year, because it's been so many years in the making. So many systems rely on it. The roll-up centric future was kind of reliant on a transition to proof of stake and to the merge itself. In my eyes, the next 18 months are all about regulations, interfacing with policymakers worldwide. I'm curious, as technologists, the role that you see your communities playing in that conversation, and if you agree that that's probably the most important thing that thematically we need to get right the next 18 months, or give me yours.
No, I think that's probably a good call, that's most important. I see the Zcash community as playing a really important role, because we were already here, we already had this technology layer, and the Zcash community already has the culture that privacy is normal. That's important. That's going to make a difference.
Vitalik, we'll give you the last word. Most important thing for the next 18 months.
Yeah, aside from privacy, I'd say scalability. Like, I think the difference between it costing $3 to send a transaction and it costing 3 cents to send a transaction is the difference between blockchains being viable as a mainstream technology at all and blockchains not being viable. It's just transaction fees feel like they're just a number, and especially for the like early crypto multimillionaires who often dominate these kinds of conversations. Even burning $3 every time you click a mouse can feel like just a number. But for the kinds of users that we want to have, it's and especially outside of wealthy countries and in places like South America, Eastern Europe, Central and Southeast Asia, and Africa. It's the difference between $3 and 3 cents and 0.03 cents is a very big deal, and that's just something that our ecosystem has to actually deliver on.
Great point.
So we've come a long way in 8 years since the Miami conference where you first unveiled the
San Jose.
idea. What's that?
San Jose conference 2013.
Well,
Oh,
I was talking about the Miami
Yeah, yeah.
conference where Vitalik was swarmed and kind of the original white paper or yellow paper. I get them all mixed up at this point. Was released. I can't wait to see what the next 8 years looks like. I hope by 2030 we have fully scaled blockchains and some semblance of privacy on these public blockchains. So to the people that are driving that charge with us today, Vitalik, hopefully we'll get you here next year. We'll have a ticker tape for you. We'll bring you out on a throne. Whatever it takes. I know people here, would love to shake your hand and congratulate you, but virtually at least. Let's give it up for Vitalik and Zooko. Thank you.
Zooko!
Way to go, Ethereum.
All right, and we'll break for lunch, everybody. Thank you, Vitalik, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.